Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me, as I said. And I guess my first question is, um, how much writing are you doing, if any, outside of songwriting? Like, do you journal? How important is that to your process, if any?
Yeah, so I get up every morning. I started this about 2 years ago and just wake up. I make a gratitude list, three things I'm thankful for, and just kind of like get up and I read just a little bit, and then I write down, kind of what I'm thinking, what I'm going to do that day, kind of whatever comes to mind. And then I try to do that again in the afternoon, before I go to bed, just kind of how the day went, what I did, just my grandmother, she passed away in 2008. But she would write every morning, would get up and write a little bit, the date and just kind of stuff that was going on. So after she passed away, it was really comforting for me to go back and read the stuff she had written. And it was just like little details, but it took me back, and I could remember, I could remember that moment of, going out and eating lunch or whatever. And so I just think that for me, it's good to be able to go back later on. So far, I've gone through 3 or 4 journals of just writing. And, some days it's like 2 sentences, but, I wrote, and I think that's very important for me to do something other than just writing songs, to have
Yeah.
something else, another outlet. Um,
How often do those things make them into your songs, though? Do you go back sometimes and look at those and say, let me go through these for song ideas?
yeah, I mean, and that's something that I will write down. I don't write a lot of, I don't like to write my songs down. Um, I just, if I'm going to use it, I memorize it. I go with it there. I'm heading to the studio tomorrow, and I've had to type up lyrics. I hate doing it. I don't know why. It's just like I've always that's the one thing that I can remember. But sometimes I will jot down like a little line of something, and I will go back and be like, okay, maybe it's good to write your stuff down sometimes. And I'll go back and use it.
Um, this is an interesting topic because songwriters tend to fall into two camps. It's those that write every day regardless, and those that say don't push it because then it becomes derivative. That if you're not feeling it, there's no use really kind of pushing your way through it. But it sounds like you do that regardless, right? I mean, do you ever find that it's a struggle, or do you just regardless you think it's a point to do that every day?
I write no matter what. Not necessarily songs. If I'm not feeling it with a song, then I don't push it. And I'll go a couple weeks and not write anything, and then I'll go and I'll write something. And I'll start getting a little nervous, like, oh man, have I lost it? Am I not going to write anything? But then I'll sit down and come up with something. But all my best songs have just come to me. I'm not one. I can go. I do co-writing now, but I can't treat it like a 9 to 5 for songwriting. Some people can, and that's great. It's just, it doesn't work for me. I'll Sometimes you get stuff, sometimes you don't. But I try to write, the journaling I try to do just for my mental health
Yeah.
anyways. And some days I don't write, and that's okay. I try to remind myself not to be like hard on myself. I'm like, all right, I get it. It's your job, but you also enjoy doing it. And so in order to be creative, you kind of I have to have a little bit of a balance there. I'm like, you can't just sit here and write all day either. You have to go experience some stuff so you'll have something to write about.
So do you, any other kind of, some songwriters, a visual artist, do a little drawing occasionally, any of that stuff?
I cannot draw. It is
Neither can I.
horrible. And it bothers me. I went to Walmart like a couple weeks ago to literally pick up like dog treats or clean something, and I came back home with like acrylic paint and like some of these like little canvas sheets. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do just some abstract painting today. I made a mess, and I just literally sat there and like painted stuff all over this canvas. But it felt good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very relaxing. It sucks and it's awful, and I will never show the outside world what I did. And maybe I'll be famous for that one day after I die and someone finds it and they're like, this is amazing. Look what she must have done this when she was like 3, you know. But yeah, I can't draw, or, you know, I'll color sometimes. It's like relaxing a little bit. I would just go buy some crayons, but every time I buy crayons, one of my dogs finds the crayons and eats them. So it's not meant to be for me, I don't think.
Yeah, some songwriters, visual art's an important part of it. I'm surprised how many of them, you know, are actually pretty good at it too. Like that's a dedicated part of the process. So do you, when it comes to, I guess, the ritual of the process for you, you know, time of day, things you have to have with you. I love reading interviews with like novelists about, you know, that ritual. How important is that ritual to your writing? Like I said, is time of day, place, things you have to have with you, stuff like that. What is that? Do you have a ritual for that process?
I am a early morning writer. I write my best stuff. I get up in the mornings and, you know, I try to, if I don't journal before I go to the gym, you know, I do it after. But I try to get up early and I'll write stuff in my head on the way to the gym, you know, and a lot of times I'll be inspired by something I did, you know, came up with then, and I'll come back home and pick up my guitar and work on that. You know, that's what I did this morning after I came back from, I'm just, you know, I have a bit of an adrenaline rush and I'm feeling good. And those are the best times. I have my best ideas in the morning. I feel that that's when I will text a bunch of people in my phone, like, hey, I have this idea. And then when they finally wake up and try to call me, I'm like, well, catch me tomorrow morning after I've had my 3 cups of coffee. Right now, I'm moved on to something else.
Now define morning, because for some songwriters, like morning's like 11 o'clock. So what's the early morning to you?
No, I like 5.
5 a.m.
Yeah, I'm like, it's been difficult for me on the road, but I do enjoy the fact that I'm on the East Coast. So if I go out to Nashville, you know, it's Central Time, I'm always like an hour ahead of everybody. And I find out there, they're always like scheduling meetings. They're like 10 a.m. And I'm like, that is, to me, that's so late. I'm like, if you're going to have a meeting, wouldn't you have it like 8 a.m.? Like my day, if I sleep till 8 a.m., my day's done. I'm just lazy.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I have to get up early and just get my day going. And it's, you know, it's a little difficult being on the road recently and trying to like get up. 5 a.m. hasn't really been happening because I'm just like, all right, you need to sleep. You need it because you're being a jerk. Like, get some rest. But I still find, you know, by 6 a.m., I got to be up and, you know, have a cup of coffee and go to the gym, or I feel kind of crappy the rest of the day. But that's my routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you write for long stretches? Or like, I'm good for about an hour and then I need to take a break, but can you write for long stretches?
Yeah. I, you know, Sadler and I do we haven't written together in a while. But when we have, like, especially during the pandemic, we would jump on a Skype or whatever. I'm good for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. After that, I'm like, all right, I gotta sit with this for a while. Like, I need a break. Now, if I'm writing something for myself, if I'm gonna write a song by myself and it's gonna be something, I'm gonna do it no more than 30 minutes. Am I gonna work on that song? Because it comes or it doesn't. That's just how it works for me. If I spend too long on something, I nitpick it and I'm like, all right, I'm tired of this. I need to and sometimes I'll step away and then, you know, a couple of days later, pick back up and be like, oh, okay, this is what I was missing. But co-writing, I can write a little longer. But if you try to, I mean, there's some people that I've sat with and they want to write for like 4 hours. I'm like, I can't sit this long. Like, I'm losing you, man. Like, and they've lost me, you know, 2 hours in. Longer than 2 hours, I can't do it. I just feel like I'm not as creative after that.
Do you, now back to that ritual, is there a place, you know, I find there's certain chairs, you know, that tend to work for me, and songwriters tell me maybe this chair, table, porch. For me, it's confidence, right? I feel like if it's happened there before, might happen there again. So is there a place where you tend to get your best writing done, or does that not matter?
That's not really a big thing for me. I do like to sit at the kitchen table when no one else is at home. I feel like, there's nothing distracting me. So that's why mornings, the house is empty. I can sit down and do that there. And I do like to be outside when I can write outside as well. Is a big thing for me, especially if like the sun's shining, getting that vitamin. But if yeah, I don't have like a set place, and of course I'm traveling so much, but I do enjoy writing in hotel rooms. I feel like
Heard that.
I'm not one that's going to go turn the TV on, really. So I'll write a lot when I'm on the road. In airplanes, I just put I have like tracks, instrumentals on my phone, and I'll try to download 3 or 4 really good ones that I really like. Try to just keep replaying them while I'm on the plane, and I'm like, all right, I can get some work done on here. So that's another thing.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because the role of movement. Songwriter Sadler actually told me how many song ideas he gets when he's swimming. I interviewed Liz Fair a couple months ago. She said the same thing.
Sadler said that while he's swimming?
Well, no, he said, okay, so you can go back. It's on video. And he said it's something about, because he grew up on the water, I think, I believe.
Yeah, he's a Myrtle Beach boy.
Yeah. And I think it was something about being, I know he did say this. It was something about, I'm not saying he goes to the pool and swims laps and gets ideas, but
water aerobics. I could see him doing some water aerobics.
Water aerobics, right. But I hear, not just, so this is an interesting topic to me because I've been a runner for many years. I ran track in college. I was a high school and college track coach for about 15 years. And I wrote an article in the Washington Post about 5 years ago about how there's a very clear connection between aerobic exercise and creativity. And I know you're a runner too. And there's so what they've done, this is in the lab. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but this is not like snake oil science. It's actually like been proven in the labs. They put people, well, I know, but there's actually research behind it. So they put people on a treadmill for 20 minutes at about 60% max heart rate, which is really not more than about a fast walk, for 20 minutes. And then give them a series of cognitive tests afterwards. And those people always score higher than people who didn't exercise. So for about 90 minutes post-exercise, there's something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that gets secreted in the brain only through blood flow. And so and what's interesting is that it's not dose responsive. So 40 minutes isn't twice as good as 20 minutes, and 90% heart rate isn't better than 60%. So they think 30 minutes is about ideal. Now I know you're like, I heard your podcast with Chris Shiflett, and you're running like hundreds of miles at a time, which I'm in awe of that. I was a sprinter in college, so that's not me at all.
I'm not a sprinter, so
I know.
We're like two different worlds there. Yeah.
Yes, but I run every day, and I know that when I go out and run, the ideas flow, and afterwards especially. But what's interesting also is that the place makes a difference. So if you're running, but you're running, let's say, in an urban environment, it's not effective because you're spending part of your time trying not to get run over by cars and trucks. So, okay, there's a lot to talk about here because, do you use that as a part of your process? And then also, because I've heard swimming, I've heard running, I've heard walking, I've heard biking, and then I've heard things like gardening. Which introduces the element of monotony. Like if your brain is involved in a monotonous activity, then you can focus on other things. Anyway, let's talk about that. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, how much do you use that role of movement in your process, besides like planes and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, the afternoons, I do like to go walk, especially now when it's cooled off. It's been so hot. So in the afternoons, I'll do the same thing with tracks. Or, I'll go listen to somebody else's music, which inspires me. But I'll take that time to just walk in the afternoon. And, I feel like combining health and writing, to me, I think a lot of people picture writing as sitting down and, writing, but I try to be up and moving, and I'll do that. I'll walk around. I'll have my guitar and I'll walk around my house like that too. I just don't like to sit down for very long. If I sit down, I'm going to take a nap. So that's not, I don't write like that, sadly. But being outside, being active, but the walking is a big thing. Seeing stuff outside, coming up with ideas in my head, and just not being distracted by things in my house is a really good thing for me. But I can definitely, the more active I am, the more energized I feel. It makes sense.
It totally makes sense. It's not a crazy idea at all if you think about it, right?
No, it's not.
Do you get though? Has there been times when you've been running or walking and that song idea comes to you? Like, because BJ told me that he has this loop he does when he runs, and he pulls out, and he in the middle of his runs he always has to stop, pull out his phone, and type out song lyrics.
I've definitely written some stuff down in my phone. Like I said, I'll typically, if I have like a really catchy line, I'm like, okay, you will forget this because there's so much going on right now, and I'll write that down. But definitely I've written, that's really become my new thing that I've really enjoyed, is writing to tracks and instrumentals. And that's so easy. I say easy, but it's easier for me, if I'm out, like I said, walking and just taking things in with my headphones in, and I can just kind of keep replaying these tracks while I'm walking around, and I feel like I'm working, but I'm not just sitting there either. I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone, and so I'm really, really big on that.
Yeah. Now let's talk about those lyrics, because I find that, well, I guess my question is, with writing down lyrics, are you a computer person or a pen and paper person?
So I'm very weird. Like, up until when I met Sadler, and then we started going into the studio, he's like, well, you have to write this stuff down because we have to be able to see the words. And I was like, okay. Like, I literally was in the studio the day of, just trying to type this stuff up really quick, like, oh my gosh. But I will, when I write to tracks, and if I'm in the studio and there's a lot of us in there writing, I write stuff down. I prefer that. If I have my laptop in front of me, I'm going to be shopping for something or doing something. I get distracted. So I try to take that break from technology. And there's something about, it's, everybody's going back to school, so I'm a little addicted to the school supplies and the ink pens and all that stuff. It's like every time I go in the store, I'm like, I need a notebook. Like, I'm going to use it because I have to write. Like, that's my job, Really, I think it's just an excuse because you feel very organized to get a new notebook or something. But I'm definitely much more of, I'm going to write this down, with an ink pen, than I'm going to type it.
Well, I asked that because I find that songwriters, I did an interview yesterday with a songwriter who showed me the composition notebooks have to be a certain color. There are certain brands of pens, certain colors of ink. Do you have favorites in that aspect? As far as
I do love like the Moleskine
notebooks.
I'm big on those, but I Sharpie ink pens. I go through those. Like, I love Sharpie ink pens. I will probably buy a pack every time I go to the store. Because I constantly have to have an ink pen laying somewhere. But I'm big. I probably write more in books than I do actually writing my own lyrics down. I'm one of those that like just has to highlight and mark stuff in books more so than anything else.
Do you ever notice that the lyrical content changes, or anything about the lyrics changes, typing them, versus writing them with a pen and paper? Do you ever find that changes at all?
I notice my accent more when I'm trying to type something, like, how, because I'm like singing, I'm like, okay, well, I don't, because singing something out for me obviously comes across. So if I'm looking at something I've typed, it's generally pretty, it's grammatically correct versus
Mhm.
how I will sing that. Leaving, I'll put going instead, but if I'm going to say I'm going there versus, if I type that, I'm going to say I'm going there. Cause like leaving that G off feels really weird to type that
Yeah.
out. So I do find that I overthink things too much, like typing lyrics up to Cindy Sadler yesterday. I was like, okay, my Southern accent is really coming through right now when I'm typing this out, but like write it exactly how you're going to sing it, versus that's something that I'll run into because if I'm looking at that paper in the studio and I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to sing it like I've written it out right here. I'm going to sing it how I
Yeah.
actually sing it. I just try to be more formal, I feel like, when I'm typing versus what I'm actually going to sing that as. So I kind of run into that a little bit.
Is that song, is the songwriting process pretty linear for you? Some songwriters tell me that, rather than that piece of paper, maybe a big piece of paper and there's words everywhere and there's thought bubbles and stuff like that. It's not a non-linear process. So is that process generally linear, or is it kind of all over the place when it comes to sitting down and writing a song?
If I'm going to write it down, it's going to be very, very linear.
Uh-huh.
Um, because I'm one of those two that like, if I start writing this song and I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to write this down, which I don't normally do. If I come up with something else in my head, like, oh, I'm not going to write it on the same piece of paper. I'm going to write it on a different one because I'm like, no, these don't go together. And so if I ever do look back, I'm not going to look and be like, did I try to was this one thing? Or, I'm going to be able to know, okay, no, no. I can't stand, I'm a little too OCD for stuff to be all over it. That would drive me insane.
Do you revise? What's your revision process like? Do you revise a lot of lyrics?
No, I'm not big on, if basically every song, that I can think of that I've written myself, like, Take Me Away was one that I, came up with, like Other Side. Like, I'm just trying to think of ones that I was the only writer on. There was no revision to those
Hmm.
songs. Like, they were just straight, like, that's how I wrote it. Obviously when you're co-writing, I feel like there's a lot of ideas being thrown out there, so you do need to kind of clean that up sometimes. But everything like for Mend, I never change. I didn't change anything on
Hmm.
that. If I'm gonna write something and use it, 9 times out of 10, I don't have to revise anything on it. If it's really, if it comes to me, it comes to me, and I'm like, okay, that's how I like it. Every now and then, yeah, there's going to be something that I'm like, okay, well, let's change a little bit there, but I don't really have to revise anything. It's really good if Sadler thinks, okay, maybe we switch this up. Um, then we go from there if he really thinks we need to. But if he doesn't think that there's anything that we should maybe try to switch up, then there's not really any change. That's why him and I have worked really well together, because we don't really have it. When it's done for me.
Okay, let's talk about the books. And I'm reading a book called Homeland Elegies right now. And the narrator in the book is a writer. And he's got this thing in the book where he actually tapes, I'm not sure how safe this is, but he tapes a pen or pencil to his finger when he sleeps, so that if an idea comes to him in the middle of night when he wakes up, he's ready to write about it. Because if he found that if he waits even 5 or 10 seconds immediately after waking up, it's gone. So
Wow.
I guess, so before we talk about reading, I know I said that like 5 times already. How often does it happen where you wake up and you go, I got to write about something that I dreamed about, or this idea that came to me?
I've had that happen a few times. I've had it happen to where I've actually been like, all right, let's just kind of put this in your phone. And I've had it happen where I'm like, I'm going to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not remember that the next day. And then it's a little frustrating. I'll do the voice memo thing, where I'll kind of like hum like something that I'm like, okay, you're going to remember that line, but you're not going to remember how you are singing it. So put that in your phone. I have done that a couple times, and it's very interesting to replay something that you woke up at 4 a.m. and like sang into your phone. It's like, oh wow, we should use this on the record because it's really good. But yeah, that's happened to me a few times.
Yeah. Okay, so reading. I do find that songwriters are voracious readers. And how much reading do you get to do, and what influence, who are your favorite writers or genres, and what influence does it have, if any, on your songwriting process?
So I'm big into self-help and like biographies, like investment books, stuff like that. I'm not a big fiction person. I don't read a lot of fiction. Right now I'm reading Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter by Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent. It's a really good book. I think I picked a right time to like read that because he talks a lot about like the record labels and like evolving in the music industry and stuff like that. So I read a lot of stuff that kind of tailors to what I'm doing, stuff that I'm going to be able to use, any kind of biography. I'm really big into this guy. His name's Robin Sharma. He had a book out called the 5 a.m. Club. I discovered that when I was recording Reckless, and I just started reading it. I thought it sounded, I was like, 5 a.m. Club. I was like, and that just kind of jump started me to reading and like actually reading books. So I ended up reading all of his books. He has a new one coming out in September. And it's just they're self-help books, and they are fiction books with how he does his self-help.
Mhm.
And I do really like those. Normally, like I said, I'm not a big fiction person. But I will read that. I'll read some Hemingway too. Like A Movable Feast is one of my favorite books.
Ah,
by him.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great book.
Yeah.
It's funny. Songwriters, I could probably list like the 5 writers that get mentioned all the time. Hemingway, not as much as you would think, but it's Kurt Vonnegut, Charles Bukowski, Raymond Carver, and I feel like the beat poets are always in there. Hemingway's in there too. But it's always, Cormac McCarthy, that comes up a lot too. I mean, all of those have very,
right.
Not the most diverse group, but it's they all, I can see why songwriters like them, because it's the economy of language, right? I mean, there's not a wasted word in any of those writers.
Yeah. I love a book that I don't know if I'll ever finish it, is, the Unabridged Journals, Sylvia Plath. I mean, it's such a deep thing to read. That is something that I will open up here and there and just kind of, pick different parts of that's inspiring to me. She was a brilliant writer, obviously very dark.
Yeah.
And so I really,
yeah. What made you pick that up? I mean, I've actually never heard her. I mean, love Sylvia Plath, but I don't hear her very often.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she just, it's something about her. I mean, it was just very, I like the sad stuff anyways. And most, female writers, that I had come across, older female writers, their stuff was, more sweet and stuff like that. So I never really connected with it, but something about Sylvia Plath, I mean, she just said it, and she was kind of, she was kind of a weirdo. Is kind of how she was perceived back then. And, I mean, obviously her story's extremely, extremely tragic, the ending there. But she was just, some of the stuff in that unabridged journals of hers was just really smart. And it was just very, some of the quotes that I found in there are just very inspiring, and it's dark, but there's beauty in that too for me. So she's someone that I really enjoyed. And then I like Dorothy Parker, because she was just she was just extremely funny,
right?
Crude, said whatever, didn't care. And so I really dig that as well.
They all